All right, so imagine you and I are strolling through Chhatrapati Sambhajinagar, soaking up that incredible city energy.
Sounds amazing.
Now, just a short hop away, maybe like 25 kilometers or so, there's this town, Khultabad, quiet, surrounded by hills, steeped in history. And right now, it's the stage for a real-life historical drama, the kind of story that makes you realize history is so much more than just what's in those dusty textbooks.
Definitely. What's happening there in Khultabad, it's like this little local issue on the surface. What should we call this town? But when you dig a little deeper, it opens up this whole conversation about, well, how do societies deal with their past? Especially the parts that are kind of tricky, the legacies of those who weren't exactly saints.
It's like looking through a window right into how people are constantly figuring out who they are now based on all that came before.
Exactly. And smack dab in the middle of this whole thing, there's this super powerful symbol, the tomb of the Mughal Emperor Aurangzeb.
And then enter Sanjay Shirsat, a minister in the Maharashtra government.
Right.
And his goal is crystal clear: rename Khultabad to Ratnapur. So you've got this clash of historical narratives playing out right there in the landscape. It's fascinating.
Absolutely. Khultabad itself is a very unique place. You mentioned it's close to Chhatrapati Sambhajinagar, nestled among these hills. But historically, it wasn't just any town. It became this important burial ground during the Mughal era. I mean, beyond Aurangzeb himself, you've got his son Azam Shah buried there. And even Nizam Asaf Jah, the founder of the Hyderabad state, a huge power player after the Mughals.
Wow. So this small town holds the remains of some pretty big figures from that period.
It really does, adding a lot of weight to its historical significance.
But let's be real, Aurangzeb is the one in the spotlight here.
Mhm.
And Minister Shirsat, the one responsible for social justice in Maharashtra, hasn't exactly been shy about how he feels about Aurangzeb being there, even though he's, long gone.
Right, right.
I even recall reading something where he flat out said there's no place for Aurangzeb's grave in Maharashtra. That's a pretty strong statement.
Oh, absolutely. And to understand why he feels that way, we've got to go back in time a bit. See, for a lot of people in Maharashtra, Aurangzeb is this hugely divisive figure, and it all boils down to his involvement in the torture and execution of Chhatrapati Sambhaji Maharaj. Now, Sambhaji, he was a Maratha warrior, the son of the legendary Shivaji Maharaj.
Right.
And for many, that historical wound, it's still raw, It hasn't faded.
It really gets you thinking, doesn't it? Aurangzeb died centuries ago, and Khultabad has had that name for ages. So why is there this sudden surge of energy behind changing it now? What's going on beneath the surface?
Well, it's probably a mix of things. There's definitely a portion of the population that's carrying this long-held sense of historical grievance.
Yeah.
It goes beyond that. Issues like this, they often gain traction when they tap into larger political goals and play on popular feelings. It's not just about the past, it's about how people see that past shaping their present and the future they want.
That makes a lot of sense. And it's interesting because at first it wasn't just about changing the name, was it? There was actual talk of removing the tune altogether. But then, of course, the Archaeological Survey of India stepped in.
Exactly. You've got the ASI operating under these heritage protection laws that put preserving historical monuments first and foremost, regardless of whether they're viewed as politically or socially acceptable today. So that legal framework kind of tied their hands. Removing the tomb, well, it just wasn't a realistic option. And that probably led them to focus on renaming as a way to symbolically address the concerns without actually messing with the protected structure.
And that leads us to the name they've put forward, Ratnapur. I found Minister Shirsat's reasoning behind this really interesting. He made this connection to Aurangabad becoming Chhatrapati Sambhajinagar, reminding everyone that Aurangabad itself used to be called Khadki.
Right.
So his argument is that Khultabad had this earlier identity as Ratnapur, and renaming it is basically about reclaiming that original historical marker. He even used this really cool analogy, called it a historical ritual plus Z, like we're hitting undo on a past name change.
It's a powerful way to put it, like hitting rewind, going back to what they see as a truer historical identity before what some view as an imposition of a different culture or political influence.
Totally. But Shirsat's vision, it doesn't stop at a new name on the map. He's talking about transforming the entire Khultabad area, or, well, Ratnapur as he hopes it will be, into this kind of memorial landscape, all dedicated to Shivaji and Sambhaji Maharaj. There's even talk of a big memorial being built there.
Imagine that. You have Aurangzeb's tomb, this protected piece of history, sitting within a space actively being reshaped to celebrate the Maratha leaders he opposed. It really emphasizes this ongoing tug of war over whose version of history gets told, who gets to choose the dominant symbols of the past in that region.
It does. And this isn't happening in isolation, is it? We've seen it in a number of places in Maharashtra getting renamed recently.
Yeah.
Ismailabad is now Dharshiv. Ahmednagar is a Hilyanagar. There's definitely a pattern emerging.
There is, and Shirsat himself has said he just doesn't like names that end in bad. It's like he associates them with a period of history or an influence he wants to move away from. He even said something about those names giving off bad vibes. It really sums up that desire to distance themselves from that past.
It's so interesting, though, when you dig into the name Khultabad itself. It means abode of eternity, which has a certain gravitas to it.
Yeah.
And it's directly tied to Aurangzeb's posthumous title, Khuld Makan, which means dwelling in paradise.
Oh, wow.
So the very name that some now see as a problem actually came from how Aurangzeb was remembered, or at least what he was called after he died. It's quite ironic.
That's a great point. This isn't just a random label. The current name has its own history and meaning, and it's deeply connected to the very person they're trying to distance themselves from through this renaming. It shows how interwoven these histories are, even when there's this push to separate them.
It really does. And what's even more revealing is if you listen to the people who actually live there, you get a whole spectrum of opinions. It's not one big chorus of agreement.
Yeah.
Some strongly support the change, seeing it as a way to honor Maratha heroes and address historical wrongs.
Right.
Then you've got others who are worried about erasing history, arguing that even controversial figures are part of the story and we shouldn't pretend they didn't exist. And of course, there are the folks who are more focused on practical everyday stuff, like give me reliable water, fix the roads, that kind of thing. The name change might not be at the top of their list.
That range of local perspectives is crucial for understanding how complicated this is. History isn't just this abstract idea. It's real life that different communities have lived through and experienced in their own unique ways, and they're going to see it differently.
And it all points to something much larger than just a name or a tomb, right? It's a glimpse into this big societal debate about how we understand our history. Who do we choose to celebrate? How do we come to terms with the parts of our past that are tougher to swallow? Aurangzeb, as we've been talking about, is someone who sparks really strong and often completely opposite reactions.
Definitely. He becomes a sort of lightning rod, drawing in different communities and their interpretations of history, and those often clash. So anything that touches on his memory is bound to stir up these fundamental questions of identity and belonging, both within the region and on a national level.
We can't overlook the involvement of right-wing groups like the Bajrang Dal and Vishwa Hindu Parishad either. They've been very vocal, demanding that the tomb be removed. And it hasn't stopped at words. This has actually led to real-world tension, like the unrest and curfews we saw in Nagpur not long ago.
That really shows how deeply people feel about this. It's a reminder that symbolic actions can have very real consequences in society and politics. For some groups, a name change might not be enough. They want to completely erase Aurangzeb or at least significantly downplay his role in the historical narrative of Maharashtra.
Of course, on the flip side, there's definitely pushback against this renaming effort. Critics say it's all politically motivated, a way to win over voters without actually dealing with more urgent issues. I remember reading a quote from someone who was against the Aurangabad name change, criticizing Minister Shirsat for concentrating on this while neglecting essential things like water scarcity.
You often hear those kinds of criticisms when people feel like symbolic gestures are taking precedence over dealing with the everyday needs and concerns of the population. It raises questions about how well the government is serving its people and whether these actions are truly in the best interest of everyone.
And we can't forget about the ASI's stance on this. They're adamant about protecting that tomb, and that effectively limits what those who want it gone can actually do. So renaming becomes kind of the only real option left for them to express their dissatisfaction.
The ASI plays a crucial role in all of this. They're the caretakers of these historical monuments, representing a commitment to preserving the past, even the parts that are uncomfortable or controversial. And this can often create friction with political forces who have different agendas or a different vision of how they want history to be portrayed.
Looking at the politics of it all, it's pretty complicated. Shirsat is part of the Eknath Shinde faction of Shiv Sena, which is in a coalition government with the BJP. Deputy Chief Minister Shinde has been super vocal against Aurangzeb, even calling his tomb a stain on Maharashtra. But then you have Chief Minister Fadnavis, who's taken a more, I guess you could say, diplomatic route. He acknowledges the tomb's protected status while also saying there's no plan to glorify Aurangzeb.
That difference in approach within the ruling coalition, it likely reflects the different groups of voters they're trying to appeal to and the various political calculations they have to make. A more hardline stance might resonate with one segment of the population, while a more moderate tone could be seen as more broadly appealing.
It's all about strategy, isn't it? And as we talked about earlier, these name changes in Maharashtra are part of this larger trend happening all over India. Cities and regions are ditching names that are seen as leftovers from colonial rule or the Mughal era. It feels like there's this massive rethinking of historical symbols and identities going on across the country.
This broader trend really shows a desire to emphasize indigenous identities and to move away from the names and symbols imposed by past rulers. It's a complex process, often driven by nationalist sentiments and a rewriting of historical narratives.
So what do you think happens next in this whole Khultabad saga? What's the next chapter?
Well, my guess is there's going to be a lot of bureaucracy, paperwork, approvals needed at different levels of government. We could see more protests, maybe even counter protests. It might become a hot topic in the state legislature. And if they do go through with the name change, there'll be all the practical stuff, new signs, updated maps, all the logistics of a place officially getting a new name. And then, of course, there's the potential development of that Shivaji and Sampaji memorial we talked about.
It makes you wonder, if those historical figures themselves could see all of this, what would they make of it? Imagine Aurangzeb's ghost trying to figure out what Ratnapur even is, while Shivaji's spirit is maybe just giving a little knowing nod. It's a funny thought, but it really highlights how important these symbols are and how much power these historical figures still hold, even today.
That's a great way to put it. You've got this historical figure who remains a source of conflict, and then the symbolic attempt to assert a different historical narrative in that same space. It really emphasizes how history is constantly being debated and reinterpreted.
To sum it all up, this potential renaming of Khultabad to Ratnapur is so much more than just an administrative change. It's deeply tied to these long-standing grievances about Aurangzeb. It's fueled by a desire to honor Maratha heroes, and it involves this whole web of complexity. The historical significance of the current name, the range of opinions among the locals, the ASI's role, and the wider political and social implications. It's a fascinating case study in how we deal with our past.
I completely agree. It really shows that ongoing tension between how we remember and interpret history, the political forces that can shape those interpretations, and the importance of cultural identity in our lives today.
And it forces us to think about the meaning we give to names and historical symbols, right? This whole debate is asking us to examine how societies handle these complex and often controversial histories. Who gets to decide what we remember, and whose perspective is usually favored when someone tries to reclaim history?
Those are big questions to wrestle with, and the Khultabad Ratnapur story isn't unique. It encourages us to think about that constant back and forth between the past and the present, and how we actively shape our understanding of history.
This is definitely a story that's still unfolding, and it's given us all a lot to think about. Thanks for diving into this with me.
Absolutely, it's been fascinating.
And for all of you listening, keep those questions in mind as you move through your day. Think about what you're hearing, what you're seeing, and how it all connects to those larger themes we've been exploring. This is just the beginning of the conversation, so keep digging, keep questioning, and keep exploring.
And remember, history is never truly settled. It's a living thing, always open to new interpretations and new discoveries.
Until next time, keep exploring the fascinating world around us.
We'll see you then.